Hi, I'm Ann from Fully Thriving, where we turn conflict into connection and avoidance into intimacy. Have you ever found yourself feeling like your spouse just doesn't listen to you? Heck, you wonder if they even hear you. Well, if you do, you're not alone. This is a common complaint amongst couples. So I thought I might just hop on here and give you 3 simple tips on how to navigate communication so you feel heard. Tip number 1, timing is everything. So we live in a day and age with our lives full to the brim. We have a lot on our schedules, a lot going on in our family, and a lot on our minds. Oftentimes we just throw things out that we're thinking and we expect our spouse to catch it, and they don't. And we feel unheard and we feel frustrated. So try this instead. When you have something that comes to mind that you need to talk about, just simply say, "Hey, honey, I have something I need to talk to you about. Is now a good time?" This lets your spouse know 2 things. One is whatever you want to say is important to you and you need to be heard. But number 2 is that you also respect your spouse enough to understand that just because it's a good time for you doesn't mean it's a good time for them. And if it's not a good time for them, no problem. You can just say, "Hey, hun, how about after dinner then?" Or "tomorrow before work." But you can find a time where you can speak and be heard. Tip number 2, manage your own emotions. So again, lives are busy. Our lives are full. We have a lot going on. And when we're in a family and in a marriage, emotions can run high and we can find things to feel frustrated about easily. But when we communicate from frustration, it has a tendency to backfire. So instead of saying, "I get so angry when you don't come home from work on time," maybe try something as simple as reminding them and making a request. Trying to be objective. For example, "Hey, honey, you know how sometimes you're home late from work? Do you think you could text me and let me know that you're running late and when you'll be home when that happens?" It's very simple, and you can achieve the same thing without the frustration. And on a little side note, when we go into frustration, we are actually operating out of the amygdala instead of the prefrontal cortex. So when we create this kind of frustrating atmosphere, neither one of you are really walking away from the conversation with the facts that you need to be able to make your marriage succeed, including being heard. And number 3 is to remember that we forget. Forgetting is really a thing. All of us have things that we forget. A lot of times we make meaning out of our spouse forgetting something, that it must mean that we're not important to them or that thing's not important to them. But what it's really saying is that your spouse is just a different person. They have their own personality. They're wired with their own thinking. And that thinking is a blessing to your family and helps you to be able to navigate this world together because you're not exactly the same person. So if your spouse tends to forget, don't take it personally. Instead, offer the grace of reminders. Say, "Hey, hun, remember I told you this. Do you want me to remind you?" And if they don't want to be reminded, if they interpret that as nagging, fine. Then they can take responsibility for remembering. But if they want reminders, be okay with it. And give them this gracious reminder of whatever the thing is that you want them to remember. You won't have to do it forever. Eventually they'll remember on their own whatever the thing is. But in the meantime, you're heard and your relationship gets closer and you have a better understanding. So I hope these 3 tips have helped. So remember, number 1, timing is everything. Number 2, manage and own your own emotions. And number 3, don't forget that we really do forget. So let me know which thing is going to be easiest for you to change or take on in the way that you communicate. Send me a comment or a message. I'd love to hear. And if you think you need some help navigating this and figuring out how to communicate better, go ahead and schedule a power session with me. I offer complimentary 20 minutes. I'd love to just chat with you and hear what's going on in your world and see if I can be of help. With that, thanks for taking the time to listen and have a